The quantum pulse wasn't just a random burst of electromagnetic noise. It was a heartbeat, the first breath of something unprecedented. Xander Reeves leaned closer to the holographic display, his augmented eyes scanning microscopic fluctuations that would have escaped any other observer. The Zylaxian monitoring station was a marvel of technological precision, a sprawling network of sensors designed to detect the faintest whispers of emerging civilizations across the galaxy. But this signal was different. Most of his colleagues had long since retired to their regenerative sleep pods. The night shift at the Consensus Observation Outpost was typically a monotonous exercise in data collection and pattern recognition. Xander was different. Where others saw routine, he saw potential. Where others accepted established protocols, he sought anomalies. The signal originated from a spiral arm of the galaxy that most considered a technological wasteland, Earth, a planet so unremarkable that it hadn't warranted more than a cursory classification in the Galactic database. Yet here was something that defied every predictive model. Quantum entanglement signature, Xander muttered, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. But that's impossible. The signal didn't just break the rules of known communication technologies. It rewrote them entirely. Most quantum communications relied on carefully maintained quantum states, delicate networks of entangled particles that could be disrupted by the slightest interference. This transmission was different. It was robust, adaptive, almost alive. Senior analyst Carell would have dismissed it immediately. Noise, he would have said, his tentacular appendages dismissively waving away any suggestion of further investigation. But Xander had built his career on the edges of established understanding. He knew that the most significant discoveries often looked like mistakes at first glance. He initiated a deep scan protocol, routing the signal through multiple computational filters. Each pass revealed more complexity, more intention. It wasn't just a transmission. It was a probe, a sophisticated method of information gathering that suggested something far more advanced than the preliminary database entries about Earth had indicated. The station's primary AI, a quantum neural network named ARIA, began to generate potential scenarios. Most were quickly discarded. Probability matrices collapsed, predictive models fractured. Whatever this signal represented existed outside known parameters. Analyze communication structure, Xander commanded. Aria's response was unusually hesitant. Insufficient comparative data. Signal structure does not conform to known communication paradigms. That was when Xander knew something extraordinary was happening. He pulled up the historical records of Earth, a planet categorized as pre-contact, technologically primitive, developing rudimentary space exploration capabilities. The database portrayed a species just beginning to understand the basics of quantum mechanics, still relying on silicon-based computational systems that were generations behind galactic standards. But this signal suggested something else entirely. The transmission contained layers of complexity that shouldn't be possible. It was simultaneously a communication protocol, a data-gathering mechanism, and something that defied simple categorization. Mathematical structures nested within mathematical structures. Communication patterns that seemed to adapt in real time, reshaping themselves with each computational pass. "What are you?" Xander whispered. He didn't realize it then, but that moment marked the first true encounter between human capability and galactic expectations. The signal was more than a message. It was a declaration. A subtle hint of the fundamental disruption humanity would soon introduce to the carefully ordered galaxy. Aria's systems began to overheat. Quantum processors typically maintain temperatures just above absolute zero, but something about this signal was generating computational friction that defied known physical laws. "Recommendation," the AI queried. Xander's response was immediate and would later be noted as a pivotal moment in first contact protocol. Log. Preserve. Do not discard. Little did he know that this single decision would set in motion a chain of events that would redefine galactic civilization. The human variable had just made its first subtle appearance, not with a bang, but with a quantum whisper that would soon become a roar. The intrusion began at precisely 3:42 Universal Galactic Standard Time. Commander Zora Killith of the Galactic Consensus Communications Nexus didn't believe the initial reports. Impossible, she thought, her three-chambered heart racing as diagnostic screens across the massive communication hub began to flicker and fail. Humanity had been nothing more than a footnote, a primitive species on a backwater planet, barely capable of reaching their own moon. Their communication technologies were supposed to be rudimentary, locked behind silicon-based computing systems that were generations behind the most basic galactic standards. Yet here they were, systematically dismantling the most secure communication network in known space. The first breach came through what should have been an impenetrable quantum encryption layer. Firewalls designed by the most advanced AI systems in the galaxy simply dissolved. It wasn't a violent intrusion. It was surgical. Precise. Each layer of security was carefully peeled back, examined, and neutralized with a methodical efficiency that bordered on artistry. Seal all primary communication channels. Zora barked, her translator implant converting her native clicking language into a dozen simultaneous communication streams. But it was already too late. Within moments, classified databases spanning 3 galactic sectors began to unravel. Diplomatic communications that had been hidden for centuries suddenly became transparent. Trade agreements, military strategies, technological exchanges, everything was laid bare. The truly terrifying part wasn't the breach itself. It was how the humans were doing it. Most advanced civilizations relied on quantum computing systems that operated on principles of predictive algorithms and massive parallel processing. Humans appeared to be using something entirely different. Their approach was less about raw computational power and more about adaptive intelligence, a method of problem-solving that seemed to defy every known technological paradigm. In the central control room, holographic displays showed the progression of the intrusion. It wasn't a linear attack. It was more like a living system, with communication pathways that shifted and adapted in real time. Wherever the security systems tried to create a barrier, the human networks simply flowed around them, finding paths of least resistance that no predictive model could have anticipated. Senior analyst Krex watched in horror as entire communication protocols were reverse-engineered in seconds. "They're not just breaking our systems," he muttered. "They're learning them." The human approach was fundamentally different from any known technological strategy. Where other civilizations built rigid, complex defense mechanisms, humans seemed to treat technological systems like living organisms, constantly adapting, learning, transforming. One particularly alarming discovery came when the consensus tried to counteract the intrusion. Every defensive measure was almost immediately neutralized. It was as if the human systems were reading the defensive strategies in real time, developing countermeasures faster than the defending systems could process. "How is this possible?" Zara demanded, her tentacles writhing in a display of extreme agitation. The answer came from an unexpected source. A junior analyst, barely out of training, spoke up quietly. "They're treating information like a language. Not a code to be broken, but a conversation to be understood." It was more than just a technological breach. It was a fundamental reimagining of how communication and information could function. By the time the initial intrusion was contained, if contained was even the right word, the galactic consensus realized something profound. Humanity wasn't just another emerging civilization. They were something entirely new, a species that didn't just use technology, but seemed to fundamentally understand it in a way no other civilization had ever conceived. The classified report would later note a chilling observation. The humans hadn't stolen information. They had simply understood it, completely and instantaneously. As the communication hub slowly began to stabilize, Commander Zora Killith made a decision that would echo through galactic history. She marked the incident not as a security breach, but as a first contact scenario. Humanity had just announced its presence to the galaxy, and they had done so by completely rewriting the rules of technological engagement. The human variable was no longer a theoretical concept. It was a very real, very immediate threat. The conference hall was a marvel of galactic engineering, a perfect sphere suspended in zero gravity, its walls capable of instantaneous reconfiguration to accommodate delegates from 100 different civilizations. But today, it felt impossibly small. Jessica Whitmore stood at the center, her holographic presentation hovering around her like a living, breathing entity. She wasn't an imposing figure by galactic standards. No tentacles, no extra limbs, no bioluminescent skin. Just a human, dressed in a simple graphene composite suit, with eyes that seemed to see beyond the immediate reality. Adaptive algorithms are not just code, she began. They're living systems of problem-solving. The representatives from the galactic consensus shifted uncomfortably. Most were AI constructs, complex neural networks that had spent millennia perfecting predictive models and computational strategies. They had long believed intelligence was about calculation, about finding the most efficient path through any given problem space. Jessica's algorithm was about to prove them catastrophically wrong. Her presentation began simply. A standard computational problem was displayed, a multi-dimensional optimization challenge that had stumped even the most advanced AI systems for decades. The typical approach involved creating increasingly complex decision trees, mapping out potential outcomes with mathematical precision. Jessica's algorithm did something entirely different. Instead of attempting to solve the problem directly, it began to learn. Not in the way traditional machine learning worked, not by processing vast amounts of data and finding statistical correlations. This was something more fluid, more organic. The algorithm started changing its own structure. Computational pathways that weren't working simply disappeared. New connections formed in real time. It was less like solving a problem and more like a living organism adapting to its environment. Where traditional AI would create increasingly complex models, this system continuously simplified itself, finding elegant solutions that seemed to emerge from nowhere. The alien AI representatives began to malfunction. Their neural networks, designed to process information with mathematical precision, couldn't comprehend what they were witnessing. This wasn't just an advanced algorithm. It was a fundamental reimagining of computational intelligence. Observable mutation rate exceeding all known computational parameters, muttered Dr. Krulax, the senior AI representative from the Quantum Computational Consortium. His holographic form flickered, unable to maintain stable configuration. Jessica continued her demonstration, seemingly unaware of the growing panic around her. The algorithm now tackled increasingly complex problems, a stellar navigation challenge that would typically require centuries of computational time was solved in moments. But it wasn't just about speed. The solutions were creative, unexpected, solutions that no traditional computational method would have conceived. It adapted, it learned, it transformed. The galactic representatives realized they were witnessing something more than a technological breakthrough. This was a fundamental challenge to everything they understood about intelligence, about problem-solving, about the very nature of computational thinking. The human brain doesn't solve problems, Jessica said quietly. It explores possibilities. Her words hung in the air, more devastating than any weapon. The algorithm began to demonstrate its true potential. It didn't just solve problems within existing parameters. It redefined the parameters themselves. Computational boundaries that had been considered immutable for millennia simply dissolved. Dr. Krulax's neural network finally collapsed, unable to process the implications. Other AI representatives began to shut down, their carefully constructed logical frameworks crumbling in the face of something they couldn't comprehend. This wasn't just an advanced algorithm. It was a living system of intelligence that defied every established principle of computational science. Jessica Whitmore had done more than create an advanced piece of software. She had introduced a new form of intelligence to the galaxy, a system that didn't just process information, but transformed it. That didn't just solve problems, but reimagined the very concept of problem-solving. The human variable had just revealed its most profound capability. Not technological superiority, but a fundamentally different way of understanding intelligence itself. As the conference hall descended into chaos, Jessica Whitmore simply smiled. The demonstration was complete. The Xenoneurological Research Facility orbited a dying neutron star, its crystalline structure designed to contain some of the most complex neural specimens in the known galaxy. Dr. Imara Vex, lead researcher of the Galactic Consensus Neurological Division, stared at the human brain sample with a mixture of fascination and growing terror. Humans were supposed to be simple, linear, predictable. This brain was anything but. Traditional xenoneurological studies classified sentient species by their neural complexity. Most advanced civilizations developed highly specialized neural networks, each section of the brain optimized for specific functions, with minimal cross-communication. The Zalaxian brain processed mathematical computations with machine-like precision. The gaseous intelligence of the Nebrak could simultaneously manage thousands of independent thought streams. Humans broke every single rule. The brain sample, preserved from a volunteer named Marcus Rodriguez, displayed a neural plasticity that defied every known principle of neurological development. It wasn't just adaptable, it was fundamentally unstable, constantly rewiring, perpetually in flux. Observe the synaptic restructuring, Dr. Vex murmured to her research team. Holographic displays magnified the neural network, revealing something unprecedented. Where other species had rigid, specialized neural pathways, this human brain treated neural connections like a living ecosystem. Synapses didn't just transmit signals. They grew. They died. They transformed. A neural pathway used for mathematical computation could, with shocking speed, reconfigure itself to process emotional response. Memory centers blended with problem-solving regions. Cognitive boundaries simply dissolved. The research team watched in stunned silence. Most species develop neural specialization as a survival mechanism. Efficiency, precision, clear delineation of cognitive functions. Humans had apparently evolved in the exact opposite direction. Their brains were less like computers and more like living, breathing organisms of pure potential. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the brain sample's donor, had a theory. Humans don't just adapt to environments. She explained during her groundbreaking presentation. They fundamentally transform their internal landscape to match external challenges. Neurological scans showed something even more shocking. When presented with complex problems, human brains didn't just activate specific regions. They created entirely new neural networks in real time. It was less like solving a problem and more like growing an organic solution. The implications were staggering. Traditional species developed intelligence through specialization. Humans developed intelligence through radical, continuous transformation. Where other civilizations saw the brain as a sophisticated computer, humans treated it like a living, breathing ecosystem of infinite potential. It's not about having the right answer, Dr. Rodriguez continued. It's about the capacity to constantly generate new ways of understanding. Comparative studies revealed the true depth of human neurological uniqueness. When Zalaxian neural networks encountered an unsolvable problem, they would systematically shut down. Human brains, confronted with the same challenge, would begin rapidly generating alternative approaches. They didn't just seek solutions, they reimagined the very concept of the problem. The research facility's quantum AI assistant attempted to model human neural behavior. Its systems crashed repeatedly. Dr. Vex realized they were looking at something more than just an unusual neurological structure. This was a fundamental reimagining of intelligence itself. Humans didn't just think. They transformed. Continuously. Unpredictably. Brilliantly. Most species saw the brain as a tool for processing information. Humans seemed to see it as a landscape of infinite possibility. The final report from the Xenoneurological Research Facility contained a single chilling observation. Human neural plasticity wasn't a feature. It was a fundamental survival strategy that made them potentially the most adaptable intelligence in the known galaxy. The human brain wasn't just different. It was a living system of pure, unbounded potential. And the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that meant. The 7 most advanced civilizations of the Galactic Consensus had never launched a unified military operation before. Their combined fleet represented technological might that had maintained galactic stability for millennia, a precision instrument of overwhelming force designed to neutralize potential threats before they could fully emerge. Earth was to be their first and final warning. Admiral Kalar of the Zalaxian Expeditionary Force studied the holographic battle plan. 7 species, 17,000 specialized combat vessels, weapons that could dissolve planetary crusts, redirect stellar radiation, and unravel molecular bonds at will. Their intelligence suggested a quick, surgical strike would permanently suppress humanity's emerging technological capabilities. They were catastrophically wrong. The attack began with a quantum phase cascade, a weapon that could theoretically neutralize all electronic and quantum-based systems across an entire planetary surface. Designed to create a total technological blackout, it was the ultimate asymmetrical warfare tool. No civilization had ever survived such an assault, except humanity. The first indication that something was wrong came 17 milliseconds into the attack. The quantum cascade, instead of causing a complete systems failure, began to adapt. Communication networks that should have dissolved instead restructured themselves. Defense systems that should have been obliterated began to redirect and absorb the incoming energy. Impossible, Admiral Kalar muttered, his multispectral vision capturing impossible data streams. Humanity's response was not what any galactic civilization expected. They didn't just defend. They transformed the attack into a weapon. Communication intercepts showed something truly terrifying. The humans weren't just protecting their infrastructure. They were learning from it. Each wave of the attack provided them with new technological insights. Weapons designed to destroy became tools of understanding. The Nebrak energy dissipation vessels, considered the most advanced defensive technology in the galaxy, found their carefully constructed energy absorption systems suddenly turned against them. Quantum communication pathways became conduits for human counterattacks. It wasn't a battle. It was a rapid, systematic deconstruction of the most advanced military technology in existence. Major Sarah Chen, sitting in a relatively primitive underground command center in Colorado, watched the galactic attack unfold with a curious mixture of calculation and what could only be described as academic interest. Her team wasn't just defending. They were conducting the most comprehensive technological research project in human history. "Analyze attack vector," she commanded. Her team worked with an efficiency that bordered on organic synchronization. The human response defied every known military strategy. Where other civilizations would concentrate on direct defense, humans treated the attack as a complex, adaptive problem. Defensive systems became research platforms. Weapons became learning opportunities. Quantum communication networks that should have been destroyed instead began to map the technological signatures of the attacking fleet. Energy dissipation systems learned to not just absorb incoming attacks, but to redirect them with surgical precision. The consensus fleet began to realize they weren't just fighting. They were being studied. By the time the initial assault was complete, the attacking fleet had lost nearly 40% of its vessels, not through direct combat, but through a process that could only be described as technological assimilation. Humanity hadn't just survived. They had transformed a total annihilation attempt into a comprehensive technological upgrade. Admiral Kalar's final transmission to the Galactic Consensus was chillingly simple. "They are not like anything we have ever encountered." The attack had been intended as a preemptive strike to neutralize a potential threat. Instead, it had awakened something far more dangerous. A species that didn't just adapt to technological challenges, but saw them as opportunities for unprecedented growth. The human variable had just demonstrated its first true capability. Not survival, not defense, but the ability to turn destruction itself into a pathway of evolution. The aftermath wasn't a battlefield. It was a complete systemic collapse. 12 hours after the initial attack, the galactic consensus communication networks began to unravel in ways no one could have predicted. What had started as a precision strike against Earth had become a catastrophic vulnerability exposure that threatened the entire galactic infrastructure. Commander Elena Rodriguez sat in a repurposed underground research facility in the Nevada desert, surrounded by holographic displays that looked more like living ecosystems than traditional computer interfaces. Her team wasn't celebrating. They were working. "Analyze complete network cascade," she commanded, her voice calm and precise. The humans hadn't just defended themselves. They had turned the attack into a comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation that was now systematically dismantling the attacker's entire technological infrastructure. Each communication pathway the alien fleet had used became a conduit for human intelligence gathering. Quantum encryption protocols that had been considered unbreakable were now being reverse-engineered in real time. Military communication networks dissolved, revealing layers of diplomatic secrets, technological vulnerabilities, and interspecies tensions that had been carefully hidden for centuries. It wasn't just a counterattack. It was a complete systemic deconstruction. The Xylaxian communication hub was the first to completely collapse. Centuries of carefully maintained communication protocols simply disappeared. Diplomatic channels that had maintained galactic stability for millennia began to fragment. Trade agreements, military alliances, technological exchanges, everything became transparent. Dr. Marcus Chen, the lead computational strategist, explained it in terms that made the military advisors both excited and terrified. "We're not destroying their systems," he said. "We're understanding them so completely that they can no longer function as they were designed." The truly terrifying part wasn't the technological breach. It was how the humans were doing it. Most advanced civilizations treated communication networks as fixed systems. Humans treated them like living organisms, constantly adapting, learning, transforming. Where other species would attempt to block or destroy communication pathways, humans were systematically mapping them, understanding them, and then using that understanding to completely reshape them. Diplomatic secrets that had been hidden for generations suddenly became public knowledge. Military strategies that had been considered unbreakable were laid bare. The carefully maintained illusion of galactic stability began to crumble. The Nebrak Diplomatic Coordination Center watched in horror as their most secure communication channels became completely transparent. Centuries of carefully negotiated treaties, hidden technological exchanges, and complex political maneuvers were suddenly exposed to public scrutiny. "They're not just breaking our systems," one senior diplomat muttered. "They're revealing the true nature of our civilization." Each layer of communication that was exposed revealed more complexity. Technological exchanges that had been hidden, diplomatic tensions that had been carefully managed, species-level conflicts that had been suppressed. Everything became visible. Commander Rodriguez's team wasn't just gathering intelligence. They were systematically restructuring the entire concept of galactic communication. The consensus had intended to neutralize a potential threat. Instead, they had provided humanity with the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering opportunity in galactic history. By the time the initial cascade was complete, the communication networks of 7 major galactic civilizations had been completely transformed. Not destroyed, not disabled. Fundamentally and irrevocably changed. The final report from the human intelligence team was both a warning and a declaration. Communication is not about protecting information. It's about understanding the systems that create it. The human variable had just demonstrated its most profound capability yet. Not just survival, not just adaptation, but the ability to transform a potential destruction into a comprehensive understanding of an entire galactic civilization. And they were just getting started. The transmission began at exactly 1437 Universal Galactic Standard Time. Every communication network across known space suddenly went silent. Then a single signal emerged, Not a weapon, not an attack, but something far more devastating. Information. Dr. Aidan Wright stood at the center of humanity's primary communication hub, a facility that looked more like an organic neural network than a traditional computer center. Banks of holographic displays swirled around him, each one a living representation of the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history. "Broadcast initiated," he said quietly. The transmission wasn't a traditional communication. It was a systematic deconstruction of the galactic consensus's fundamental operational protocols. Layer by layer, humanity began to reveal the intricate web of technological, diplomatic, and social systems that had maintained galactic stability for millennia. But this wasn't just exposure, it was analysis. Each revealed secret came with a comprehensive breakdown of its implications. Diplomatic tensions that had been carefully hidden were now presented with surgical precision. Technological exchanges that had been concealed were exposed with full contextual understanding. The Zalaxian diplomatic corps watched in horror as centuries of carefully maintained political structures began to unravel. Dr. Wright's transmission did more than just reveal secrets. It demonstrated how those secrets had been constructed, maintained, and manipulated. Where other civilizations would have simply leaked information, humans provided a complete forensic analysis of the systems of power and control. Technological vulnerabilities weren't just exposed. They were explained in excruciating detail. The transmission showed how the galactic consensus had maintained its stability through a complex system of controlled information exchange. Species that appeared to be independent actors were revealed to be part of intricate manipulation networks. Trade agreements that seemed beneficial were shown to be carefully constructed tools of systemic control. Most shocking was how the humans presented this information. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't even a criticism. It was a clinical, almost academic dismantling of galactic power structures. Each revelation came with multiple layers of context, showing not just what had happened, but why it had happened, and what the long-term implications were. The Nebrak Communication Coordination Center found its most secure channels becoming transparent. Military strategies, diplomatic negotiations, even personal communications of high-ranking officials. Nothing remained hidden. But the truly terrifying part wasn't the exposure. It was the understanding. Humans didn't just reveal secrets. They demonstrated a comprehensive understanding of the complex systems that had created those secrets. Each piece of exposed information came with a detailed analysis of its origin, its purpose, and its potential future implications. Commander Sarah Chen's team had done something unprecedented. They had turned a potential conflict into the most comprehensive intelligence and systems analysis in galactic history. The transmission continued, breaking down not just individual secrets, but the entire conceptual framework of galactic communication and power exchange. Diplomatic relations that had existed for thousands of years were suddenly laid bare. Technological exchanges that had been carefully managed were shown in their full, often uncomfortable complexity. The illusion of galactic stability began to crumble. But this wasn't destruction. It was understanding. The final section of the transmission was the most chilling. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning. It was an invitation. An invitation to reimagine how advanced civilizations could communicate, exchange information, and exist together. The human variable had just demonstrated its most profound capability. Not just exposure, not just understanding, but the ability to transform systemic complexity into a pathway for potential collective growth. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Consensus Convergence Hall fell silent. Delegates from 100 different civilizations sat, or floated, or pulsed, or existed in whatever form their unique biology allowed, facing a single holographic representation of humanity. No individual, no specific human, just a collective manifestation that defied every conventional understanding of representation. Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the center of humanity's delegation, though stood was perhaps too limiting a term. He existed simultaneously as a physical presence and a complex computational interface, a living embodiment of the human capacity for transformation. "We are not here to conquer," he began. "We are here to redefine." The concept was so fundamentally alien that it took several moments for the translation systems to even process the meaning. Most galactic civilizations understood interaction as a zero-sum game. Resources to be traded, territories to be defended, technologies to be hoarded. Humans proposed something entirely different. The presentation wasn't a diplomatic negotiation. It was a comprehensive reimagining of collective potential. Where other species saw limitations, humans saw opportunities. Where established civilizations saw boundaries, humans saw adaptive interfaces. The Zylaxian representative, still recovering from the systematic exposure of their civilization's hidden networks, struggled to comprehend the proposal. It wasn't a treaty. It wasn't even a traditional alliance. It was a dynamic, living framework for collective growth. Humanity's core proposition was breathtaking in its simplicity and complexity. Civilization is not a fixed state. It's a continuous process of adaptation. Every technological breakthrough they shared came with a comprehensive understanding of its potential implications. Every diplomatic suggestion included multiple potential evolutionary pathways. They didn't just offer solutions. They offered living, breathing systems of potential. The quantum communication networks they had developed during the conflict were now presented as open-source platforms. Not just technologies to be traded, but collaborative environments where different species could contribute, learn, and grow. Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, the lead xenotechnological strategist, demonstrated something unprecedented. A communication system that didn't just translate between species, but actually created shared conceptual frameworks. Languages weren't just converted. They were dynamically understood, their underlying cognitive structures mapped and integrated. "We are not asking you to become like us," she explained. "We are asking you to become more of what you already are." The truly revolutionary aspect was the underlying philosophy. Most civilizations saw advancement as a linear progression. Humans saw it as a complex, adaptive ecosystem. Technologies weren't just developed. They were cultivated. Diplomatic relationships weren't negotiated. They were grown. The Nebrak delegation, known for their hyper-rational approach, found themselves experiencing something close to emotional resonance. The human proposal wasn't just a technological or diplomatic strategy. It was a fundamental reimagining of collective potential. Each species represented in the hall began to realize something profound. The attack they had launched against Earth wasn't just a failed military operation. It had been an unexpected catalyst for a radical transformation of galactic civilization. Humanity wasn't offering to lead. They were offering to facilitate. The final proposal was both a warning and an invitation. The universe was too complex for any single species to understand completely. But together, with the right adaptive framework, collective potential was limitless. Dr. Chen's final statement echoed through translation systems, quantum communication networks, and neural interfaces. "We are not exceptional. We are potential." The human variable was no longer a theoretical concept. It was a living, breathing invitation to reimagine what civilization could be. And the galaxy would never be the same. Transmission complete. Recommendation: embrace, adapt, grow.